Natural habitats in Latin America have been widely affected by intensive forms of mining, deforestation, monocrop agriculture, and industrial contamination. Many of these practices are linked to the colonial and neocolonial extraction of natural resources from the continent. To decolonize nature means to resist its harmful overexploitation for human purposes, but it also means to search for ways of thinking about and relating to the natural world that are less anthropocentric, that do not view humans as separate from nature and superior to it. This video essay presents work by Latin American artists who explore ways of decolonizing nature. Their projects point to the need to reverse environmental damage, but also to imagine new ways in which we might cohabit and collaborate with other species. Mexico's rivers are among the most heavily polluted in the world. Water laws and regulations are not well enforced, and waste from industries is often dumped untreated into waterways. It poisons fish, destroys crops, and affects the health and livelihoods of those who live nearby. Artist Gilberto Esparza has developed a biomachine that converts contaminated water into energy and cleans it of toxins. He has trialled it at several sites, including this one, on the banks of the river Lerma in the city of Salamanca. The robot is programmed to go in search of polluted river water, which it sucks in and filters through a series of microbial fuel cells. There, bacteria oxidize the waste, consuming the oil, mercury, and other toxins, and generating small electrical voltages that are used to power the machine. The clean water feeds the small plants that live in it. As it operates, it creates small oases that attract insects and other organisms, rebuilding a damaged ecosystem. Esparza's nomadic plants are not a solution that could be rolled out on factory lines to solve the world's environmental problems. The aim of the project is to help us imagine a greater balance in relationships between technology and the environment. What the project shows is that we don't actually need technology to solve the problem of polluted water. Here, it just facilitates the natural capacity of bacteria to clean water of toxins. Everything about the design of the nomadic plants is focused on the efficient use of minimal energy. The porous structure is inspired by forms in nature, such as the bone structure of birds. It reduces the weight of the machine and the energy required to move it. It advances slowly, with feet connected to a single motor, again to save energy. We could think of Esparza's project as a call for a slow robotics. Robots in the commercial world are developed to give us ever greater speed, power, and efficiency, but their production involves a lot of waste. The nomadic plants promote very different values, such as the recycling of waste and a careful, sustainable use of energy. They draw attention away from the power of human technology and towards the creative and regenerative energy of living organisms. Joaquín Fargas from Argentina also creates art-science projects that reflect on the possibility of a better environmental future. In several site-specific installations in Antarctica, he's explored the possibility of using geoengineering to reverse climate change, particularly the melting of ice at the poles, one of the clearest indicators of global warming. In one work, he installed 3 windmills. These generated the electricity to operate thermoelectric cells that cooled the air and created ice, slowing down, if only minutely, the rate of ice thaw. For another installation, he designed and built a solar-powered robot with rotating feet. As it moves across the snow, it helps to compact and crystallize it, turning it into ice and adding mass to the glacier. For Naomi Klein, looking to geoengineering as a solution to climate change simply bolsters what she calls our culture's most intoxicating narrative, the belief that technology is going to save us from the effects of our actions. Does Fargas promote this narrative? These works are intended to spark debate and reflection, not to be prototypes for mass production. Their whimsical appearance and their clunky do-it-yourself aesthetics seem to point to the enormity of the task, its semi-fantastical nature, and the hubris of undertaking it. But compared with Esparza's nomadic plants, they place much more emphasis on the ingenuity of humans and our potential to solve environmental problems with new technologies.
La simbiosis del arte, la ciencia y la tecnología es algo que me gusta ver reflejado en mis proyectos. La inquietud de qué es lo que puede llegar a resolver temáticas como la ambiental o el riesgo que tenemos nuclear, de una confrontación nuclear que nos derivaría en una tercera guerra mundial que tal vez no tengamos la posibilidad de sobrevivir, hace que esté pensando constantemente en ver qué formas son las que nos pueden resolver y garantizar el futuro de la humanidad. La biotecnología y la inteligencia artificial hacen que estemos en los albores de un nuevo tipo de revolución que va a cambiar la propia esencia del ser humano. Tal vez esta propia tecnología sea la que nos permita garantizar la supervivencia de nuestra especie y tener un futuro garantizado.
In 2008, Ecuador became the first country in the world to inscribe the rights of nature into law in a series of amendments to its constitution. These are inspired by indigenous Andean perspectives on the pursuit of life in harmony with the natural world. Despite these new rights, the current government is pressing ahead with oil drilling at a controversial site in the Amazon, the Yasuní National Park. In response to this conflict, Ecuadorian artist Paúl Rosero Contreras has created an artificial forest. To do so, he developed a 3D printer that works with a biological substrate, depositing layers made of a mixture of biodegradable plastic filament and a fungus growing in agar. The title of the work points to the horror of a future post-natural landscape replacing the Amazon's exuberant biodiversity. This map, exhibited with the artificial forest, shows Ecuador and the Yasuní Park, which had been given a protected status, now withdrawn. But Rosero's work also conveys a sense of hope for regeneration. His forest is alive, the delicate mushroom fronds twisting and tangling around the trees to form their foliage, demonstrating the capacity of natural organisms to adapt and survive, even in the most adverse environments, if we allow them the minimal conditions they need to do so. Rosero Contreras has also taken part in transdisciplinary research projects that bring together artists, designers, and scientists. In one, he worked alongside two marine biologists who were investigating the resistance mechanisms of a particular species of coral. He filmed purple haze underwater near the volcanic vents of an island in the Galapagos. The bleached, lifeless coral reefs shown in many nature documentaries have become a harrowing emblem of environmental destruction. Unlike these, Rosero's reefs are full of effervescent life. The immobility of the camera and the long duration of the shots emphasize how much in the frame is rippling, gliding, gushing, swelling and churning. In fact, the video shares very little with a conventional nature documentary. It doesn't feature humans at all, leaving the biologists, conservationists and filmmakers out of the frame. It avoids typical human-centered narratives of discovery, apocalypse or salvation. It also diverges from a documentary mode in its use of sound with a science fiction, futuristic quality.
El sonido del video Purple Haze es una composición que se basa en grabaciones de diferentes especies y fenómenos acústicos, principalmente submarinos, otros relacionados con glaciares o icebergs. Este es un archivo que he ido recopilando a través de los años y en este caso está utilizado en este video como una forma de dar una dimensión más ficcional a la imagen que se mira. Entonces el diseño sonoro es una mezcla entre registros que le corresponden a las imágenes y también sonidos que vienen de este archivo que he venido trabajando.
The futuristic aesthetic created in the video may be a fictional effect, but it is also closely related to the aims of the research project. The carbon dioxide bubbles naturally emitted from the volcano vents here raise the acidity level of the water. This effect will be increasingly seen across the world as the oceans absorb more carbon dioxide. So this is a site where we can observe the likely future of coral species and study their mechanisms of defense and adaptation. Corals maintain close relationships with algae and microbes, exchanging nutrients with them, and this is what helps them to be resilient and adapt quickly to environmental change. The study of symbiosis in corals and other organisms has led to a paradigm change in biology. Focusing on species as composites and communities, linked through collaboration and co-evolution, undermines the emphasis on individual species that has marked evolutionary thought since Darwin. Rosero's video shows us the success of a tightly knit ecosystem that has evolved and adapted by creating symbiotic relationships. Artists across the world are taking inspiration from new scientific research on the intelligence and creativity of life forms that we had thought were very basic. Based in Mexico City, the Interspecifics collective explores the bioelectrical activity of bacteria, plants, and slime molds. They build custom-made machines to record this activity and use open-source software to turn it into images and sounds. Some of their projects are based on bacteria from the Penibacillus species, which develop complex colonies on semi-solid surfaces and demonstrate sophisticated kinds of self-organization. Collectively, Penibacillus bacteria are able to store information and even learn from past experience in ways that provide evidence of intelligence, social behavior, and advanced communication. For this live performance of speculative communications, the activity of the bacteria is translated into an audiovisual spectacle. A machine learning component organizes the sounds into a composition with a structure. As the module learns and co-evolves with the microorganisms, it produces a generative piece that continually changes and never repeats itself. For the artists, the aim is to focus attention on the performativity of all living matter, the extent to which everything is vibrating, oscillating, fluctuating, and how all life is linked through the electrical and electromagnetic phenomena arising from the continual transfer of energy between cells, organisms, and their environment. The performances they stage don't simply translate this energy into sound and image, they also bind humans and bacteria together in a form of interspecies co-creativity. The work of Interspecifics encourages us to think about intelligence and creativity as qualities that are not exclusively human, but intrinsic to life itself. Kuai Shen, an artist from Ecuador, curates ant exhibitions to draw attention to the complexity of their social organization. This one creates an analogy between ant communication and the scratching techniques used by DJs on vinyl turntables.
Ants accomplish the generation of bottom-up structures communicating mainly by pheromones. But they also produce modulatory vibrations, called stridulations, to call for help, to recruit nestmates for defense, for gathering and transporting food, and stridulations even serve as a pneumatic mechanism to cut up vegetation or dig out trapped nestmates underground. A pair of turntables responds to the changes that emerge from the colony by spinning vinyl records and producing scratching sounds, similar to the original stridulation of the ants. Thus, this cybernetic system depends on the ants in order to function properly, and the scratching effects of the system establish a symbiosis of a new kind with the ants. The heat and sound energy produced by the rotating motors of the turntables and the whole system in itself stimulate the work of the ants by increasing the temperature and humidity of their artificial ecosystem.
Shen's exhibitions show something of the culture and social organization that have evolved in ant communities, tracing unexpected analogies with human societies. On the other hand, we also witness a crucial difference in the way that ants relate to their environment. Ants colonize landscapes in a way that transforms them but creates opportunities for other species to benefit from cohabiting and cooperating with them. As Shen says, this makes them successful eco-engineers. Maize, the primary crop and main food staple in Mexico, is at the center of a heated debate that brings different economic and cultural practices into direct opposition. Activists have protested against the introduction of genetically modified types of maize by Monsanto and other American agrotech companies. These have been locked in a long battle with the Mexican government over their right to experiment with GM crops on Mexican soil. There is evidence that local maize varieties, carefully developed by indigenous groups over centuries, are being contaminated through cross-pollination. Maize has traditionally been grown in Mexico in small plantations alongside other crops, in practices that are much more sustainable and help regenerate the soil. The modern monocultures used in industrial agriculture may initially produce higher yields, but over time they degrade the soil. The extensive use of herbicides also damages ecosystems. Armando Bartra argues that the defense of polyculture is not only a struggle for sovereignty and food security. It is also, he writes, a battle, an even deeper and more decisive one, to preserve the cultural plurality and the biological diversity on which not only the future of the country, but also the future of humanity depend. A collective headed up by Maria Antonia González Valerio has curated several works that reflect on the debate.
We focus on the topic of maize because it has a symbolic significance for the Mexican culture, being deeply rooted in the national imagery, in the ancient myths, in the food, and further, it can also be thought as an axis of a way of being, of dwelling, and transforming nature and culture.
In a space designed to look like a greenhouse, they grew maize seeds from sources across the country. These were sprayed with glyphosate, a herbicide commonly known as Roundup, brought to the market in the 1970s by Monsanto. Glyphosate became widely used, particularly after the introduction by Monsanto of crops that were genetically modified to be resistant to it.
We had a performance every week at the museum, sprinkling the seeds with glyphosate, and we had some fun wandering around the different rooms dressed up as scientists with worried looks.
The herbicide would kill the non-transgenic maize plants in the installation, while leaving any transgenic plants alive, as proof of the cross-pollination that is taking place. The wider exhibitions curated by the collective bring in a diversity of voices, showing how debates over transgenic maize in Mexico are rooted in much broader issues around culture, ecology, land use, inequality, and poverty. To decolonize nature is to recognize that humans are not exceptional among living beings in possessing culture, intelligence, or creativity, and to find ways of relating to our environment that are not ones of reckless exploitation. Many of these artistic projects also decolonize science. Western science has developed as a series of increasingly specialized forms of knowledge that claim to transcend culture and political ideology, but many of these have served capitalism's drive for greater speed, productivity, and efficiency. The philosopher Isabel Stengers calls instead for a slow science. Like slow food or slow fashion, slow science would be more conscious of how knowledge is produced. It would ask what is excluded, overlooked, or even sacrificed in the construction of that knowledge, and whose interests it serves. Rather than an abstract quest for knowledge pursued in the artificial conditions of a laboratory, science should be reconnected to cultural, social, spiritual, and ethical spheres of experience. This is the kind of work carried out by González Valerio's collective, whose exhibitions show how the introduction of new biotechnologies raises issues that take us far beyond the question of what is scientifically possible or what increases productivity. But it is also carried out by the other artists featured here, who question the investment of Western science in a certain model of progress based on the control and rationalization of nature, and help us understand the value of interspecies community and creativity. Their work often democratizes science by using open-source technologies and encouraging public participation. In connecting art and science, they start to break down the hyper-specialized nature of knowledge in the Western world to make room for different ways of knowing that might help us find new ways of living.